In the name of the Holy and Undivided Trinity, one God. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. So anger is a complicated business. It is a universal human emotion, and yet it tends to be a taboo subject. We don't really like to talk about anger. Or maybe it would be more accurate to say we're afraid to talk about anger. Even the way that we talk about anger colloquially reveals some of our discomfort. We might say, oh, I lost my cool, I lost my temper, or I just lost it. And this language of loss says something. It implies that anger takes something away from us. It takes us out of our right minds. It makes us less human, somehow. And certainly, unchecked anger can and does have disastrous consequences, as we know all too well from experience. Anger, when unaddressed, can lead to violence and hate and a whole host of other unpleasant and undesirable things. But does it have to? Is anger necessarily bad? Or is it more complicated than that? Well, as with so many things, the Bible does not speak with one voice on the subject of anger. And this is important to realize because so often when we think about anger in a churchy context, we remember from some dim recollection of our childhood that, anger is one of the 7 deadly sins, wrath. And our brain stops there and makes the connection that anger, sin, bad, case closed. Well, in reality, there's a lot more there. And we see some of that diversity of opinion in these readings today. In Exodus, we hear about a God who is jealous, who preserves the sins of parents unto their children for generations, but he carries mercy over for longer. In other places in the Bible, God is slow to anger and abounding in kindness. So which is it? Is he angry? Is he not angry? Hard to say. And then in the gospel for today, we have a very angry Jesus. There's no glossing over it. You can't make this pretty. He is mad. And he is acting on his anger. He's basically having a temper tantrum. Anyone who has a small child will recognize Jesus' behavior here. Yes. He is storming into the temple with a whip, chasing sacrificial animals everywhere, dumping out coins. There's furniture falling. It's a mess. And it's a scene that makes us very deeply uncomfortable. How would we feel if someone stormed into the sanctuary and started knocking things over and knocking over the pews? It wouldn't go over very well. We wouldn't be delighted. So at best, Jesus is having a really bad day. And at worst, he's engaging in criminal destruction of property and maybe even blasphemy. This is not pretty. And there are no shortage of ways to explain away Jesus' behavior. There are a multitude of reasons, valid, reasonable reasons, why he might have been upset about the practices he was seeing in the temple. But I'm not really interested in those today. I'm not interested in explaining away Jesus' emotional response because we do more than enough of that ourselves. We don't need more practice in that particular set of behaviors. What I am interested in is what do we do with this uncomfortably furious Jesus that the lectionary has given us today? How do we make sense of him? And what does he have to offer us? So as Christians, we believe that God chose to become incarnate in the person of Jesus. He chose to share our humanity, to bridge the gap between us and God. So in this understanding, the incarnation is the ultimate act of love. It is God choosing to have a human body with all of its limitations and complications so that God can better understand what it is like for us. And Jesus, we believe, was fully and completely human, just like us, in every way except for one, which is that he never sinned. Well, that has some interesting implications for how we read this story now, doesn't it? It becomes a logic puzzle. So if anger is a sin, and Jesus got angry, but Jesus never sinned, well, something doesn't fit here. But which part is it? In my opinion, this all comes back to Jesus' humanity. In the church, We could talk a good game about how Jesus was a human being, but we so often try to smooth over the sharp edges. We try to make the idea of a human God a little bit easier to digest, a little bit more palatable. And it's so important for us to pay attention to which parts of Jesus' humanity make us squirm, because chances are those are the same parts about our own humanity that make us uncomfortable. Chief culprit? Bodies. Right? We like the idea of an incarnate God when it's a cute baby in the manger or just in the abstract sense, but the minute we start thinking about all the imperfect and inconvenient things that bodies need and do, yeah, we change the subject really fast. We don't want to talk about that. So let me say it. Jesus got sick. He got hungry. He got tired. He got hot. None of those things are sins. And so Jesus, being human, is not immune from them. And Jesus, human being that he was, also had feelings. Lots of feelings. Big, uncomfortable, complicated feelings, just like we do. And I dare to say that that is extremely good news for us, because it means that our most vulnerable and human and maybe shameful moments of anger or grief or anxiety or sadness, those things are not beyond God's comprehension. Jesus has been there, done that. And by entering into our deepest, darkest emotional places, God is pronouncing all of that human experience holy, because everything that God touches becomes holy. So how might that change how we experience an emotion like anger? Often, I think, the anger we might feel pales in comparison to the stories and value judgments that we attach to it. So tell me if this sounds familiar. We feel that prickling of rage, maybe someone cut us off in traffic or took the last can of whatever at the grocery store, and we think, oh no, this is bad. I'm getting angry. I don't have time for this. What will people think? This is unseemly. Oh no, I can't do this. Anger is bad. What is wrong with me for feeling this way? Is this familiar? Am I the only one? Okay, good. Just checking. And Jesus today offers a stunningly simple response to that reaction that we all know. He says, there is nothing wrong with you for feeling this way. Strong feelings are part and parcel of what it means to be human, and Jesus gets that from personal experience. He validates it. So I think this story of Jesus cleansing the temple, which is one of the rare stories that occurs in all four Gospels, which is a sign to pay attention, this story exists to remind us that feelings are not sins. I'm going to say it again, because we tend to get very confused about this, especially when we're in the midst of strong feelings. Feelings are not sins. What we do with them, well, might be. But the feelings themselves are not only normal, but holy, because they are invitations for us to encounter God. So, for example, anger tends to crop up when something isn't right, when some boundary has been crossed, when some expectation hasn't been met. And that can be as mundane as being grumpy about some traffic that catches us off guard and we feel should not be there, this is not the way things should work. Or it can be as potent as civil disobedience and protest in the face of social injustice that we feel cannot stand. It is not right. And we're seeing that latter side of anger with just beautiful, thrilling clarity in the witness of the teenage survivors in the Parkland shooting, who are demanding a better future from their legislators and from all of us. They are lifting their voices and channeling their anger to say, this is not right. Anger alerts us to the fact that something isn't the way it should be and that something needs to change. It is an invitation to action. So that's perfect timing, because the season of Lent, which we're right in the middle of, is also an invitation to action. It's an invitation to explore the wilderness places in our own hearts, those places that we might be ashamed of, the places we don't like to go to, the places whose existence we might try to deny. And if you're anything like me, There might be some anger in the wilderness of your own soul, some anger that is crying out for recognition and maybe healing. What anger is calling you to let go of it? And what anger is crying out for recognition and action? And if it's not anger that's calling out for your attention, then maybe it's grief or sadness or anxiety. It could be anything. But whatever it is that awaits you in that wilderness, be not afraid. Because there is nothing out there or in here that is unfamiliar territory for our God. And that, my friends, is extremely good news. Amen.